So on today's agenda, I'd like to talk about open water versus pool swimming. What does true efficiency look like and what myths might need to be busted in the process of that? Okay, so quickly, today's agenda, open water versus pool stroke. What does true efficiency look like and what myths need to be busted in the process? We're going to look at structuring open water sessions in the new norm environment. And like I mentioned for our listeners just earlier on there, on the 1st of May, we were back in the open water down in Freshwater Bay in the Swan River here in Perth. So I've got some information about what we've done there. And then also how to build yourself up or your swimmers back up. If indeed you are a coach listening into this, and hopefully have a bit of a Q&A running through that. I'd like to give a little bit of a brief history of time, as it were, not Stephen Hawking style, but Paul Newsome style, with respect to our coaching program and what it entails, etc. But one of the things I was just sort of mentioning there was what I'd really dearly love today is for most of you to be listening to this thinking, I've heard most of this before, and I understand some of the concepts that he's talking about here, simply because when I set up SwimSmooth in 2004, 16 years ago, at that point, a lot of what we were talking about with respect to stroke rate and rhythm, stroke length versus stroke rate, arm recovery actions over the top of the water, and how you'd maybe want to adapt your stroke for the open water to swim better as a triathlete, was seen to be very, very controversial. And I'm going to bring up some of those controversial points a little bit later on. Now, if you listen to them and you think, oh, well, yeah, that's obvious. That obviously makes sense. Well, then we've done a good job over the last sort of 10, 15 years in trying to educate people to understand the differences between pool swimming and indeed open water swimming for triathlon. If you're listening to some of this stuff and you still find it's a little bit controversial, then that's also great as well. Let's have a little bit of a discussion about that at the end. But hopefully I've got some good examples to draw upon to expand on that there. So we're obviously, SwimSmooth, like I say, has been around since 2004. We're passionate about coach and swimmer education. This is my business partner here, Adam Young. He's based over in the UK. We've been very lucky enough to work with some fantastic swimmers over the last 15 years. Here we see Lucy Charles and her partner Reese Barkley there on the screen. Done quite a bit of work with Lucy on a stroke over the years and just sort of tuning into it. What's really interesting about some of these great swimmers, as I'm going to show you right away with a very short video clip of one of the world's best ever marathon swimmers, is that ironically enough, the stroke which tends to suit swimming well in the open water can often look very different to what it looks like with the top pool swimmers in the world, almost to the point where some of those great open water swimmers have a very derogatory sense about what makes their stroke look or what it looks like compared to their pool counterparts. So let's take a little look here. This here is 7 times world marathon swimming champion Shelley Taylor-Smith. Now, I'm hoping this plays for you smoothly enough. Shelley is what we classify as a swinger. Now, we're going to get into that a little bit more in just a moment's time based on our swim type paradigm. But let's take a little look at Shelley Taylor-Smith's stroke. Now, not only has Shelley won 7 world marathon swimming championships, but she was actually world ranked #1 for both men and women at the same time, which is just truly incredible. She's won the Manhattan Island Marathon swim a total of 5 times and was a former world record holder on that very prestigious event. Let's take a little look at Shelley's stroke because it looks very different to what you might think it might look like. Now, as you can see here, she's got quite a straight swinging arm recovery over the top of the water and seemingly very little kick. Now, admittedly, Shelley is not a triathlete. She'd never have worn a wetsuit. But what's interesting about her stroke, Shelley used to maintain an average stroke rate of 88 strokes per minute when she swam from Sydney to Wollongong, a distance of 70 kilometers. Let's look at her from underneath the water from the front here. So she's got a relatively short stroke, and I say that in inverted commas, with a very quick stroke rate. 88 strokes per minute, if you've ever tried to swim at that speed, is really quite quick. What defines a stroke from this position is just how well she's catching the water, bending the elbow and pressing the water back behind her. But look at this beautiful 2-beat kicking action. Literally, as her right hand enters into the water, the left foot kicks down, and the left hand enters into the water, the right foot kicks down. Now, interesting enough, Shelley didn't want us to ever film her. This was filmed back in 2010 because she had a very derogatory sensation of what her stroke looked like, purely because many people had said to her in the past, oh, Shelley, your stroke doesn't look very good. Imagine how much better you'd be if you looked a little bit more efficient or if you looked a little bit more of a classic high elbow over the top of the water. Thank goodness, though, her coach knew not to change her. So we're based over here in Perth, in Western Australia, down at the Claremont swimming pool specifically. This is the HBF Stadium. This is where most of our filming has been done. So if you've seen some of our stuff online, this is our squad here at the Claremont swimming pool. We have around about 400 swimmers attend the sessions over the course of a given week. You can see a little bit of that coaching action happening here in hyperspeed, or whatever, hyperlapse, I think it's technically called there. But we also run some of our sessions, as I mentioned, down in the Swan River. And during COVID, from 1st of May onwards, this was our big swimming pool. It's a distance in this bay here, freshwater bay, it's around about 500 meters. And from the 1st of May, we organized for myself and 2 of my other coaches to take 9 individual swimmers and run them through some training sessions in the open water, which was structured to operate a little bit like swimming in the pool. And I'll talk a little bit more about those a little bit later on. Now, as Robbie kindly introduced there, we're very lucky to be associated with British Triathlon and also the International Triathlon Union. We write all of their swim coaching curriculum for their coaches, for their coach education. We're also partners in the Hoob design wetsuit. So you see the 2 Brownlee brothers there in the middle. Well, we helped to actually create and design those suits since way back in 2011. And our publishers there with the Swim Smooth book, Fernhurst and Wiley and Sons. So yeah, we've been with Swim Smooth, has been with British Triathlon since 2010. It was a very proud moment when, obviously I'm from the UK, when British Triathlon contacted us and said, hey, look, we need some help rewriting our coaching curriculum, our coaching material. So that's what we did way back then. We partnered up with Hoob, as I mentioned, in 2011, so shortly after that. And one of the interesting things, one of the reasons why Hoob actually came to us, so Hoob make a range of fantastic wetsuits. They're super popular in the UK. They're growing in popularity over here in Australia. Obviously, one of the key reasons they are so popular is the Brownlee brothers are both sponsored by Hoob and have worn them since the very incarnation of Hoob design wetsuits. All of those wetsuits have been based on our swim type paradigm. So Dean Jackson from Hoob Design came to us and said, look, we love your swim type system. We want to be able to build wetsuits around that. So acknowledging different people's heights, builds, body profiles, buoyancy in the water, etc. And that's how that was sort of built. In 2014, the ITU came to us and said, hey, look, we like what you've done with British Triathlon. We want you to do that for our independent countries around the world. So as Robbie mentioned there, Swim Smooth and our coaching curriculum is now in 119 countries around the world. And just last year, we actually signed up with Everyone Active, which is a big swimming facility program in the UK, 120 facilities over there offering Swim Smooth programs directly to their swimmers. I'm very proud to sort of say that some of the coaches who you might have been listening to, if you've been listening to podcasts over the last little while, Bevan McKinnon here from the Fitter Radio, we've proudly had him on our 3-day coach education course, as we have with Michael Erickson, the host of that triathlon show there as well. So all in all, over this time, we've taken through 650 coaches through our 3-day coach education course. These are coach education courses where swimmers and other coaches come in and actually spend 3 days with us learning a little bit about Swim Smooth methodology and how to actually refine somebody's stroke using primarily video analysis. To date, we now have 50 certified coaches dotted around the world. And obviously, like you, if you're a triathlon coach listening into this, you may well be struggling a little bit to regain some footing after COVID. We've all been struggling with that, and we've been working quite diligently over the last 3 months or so to ensure that everybody hopefully survives this. Okay, so let's get on to it then. Pool versus open water. The 4 R's. Now, funnily enough, every good presentation needs a good acronym. Here's ours. I made it up around about 45 minutes ago, but hopefully it sort of gives you a little bit of context in terms of what we're going to be talking about. So the 4 R's are readying, aka training. I'm going to talk a little bit about CSS development work and some of the work that I've been doing with both my own athletes and also as an athlete myself. Question mark there over speed work and how much is important. And some hard work will be required. Many people talk to you about this idea that, really effective and efficient freestyle swimming should be very effortless, because they look at swimmers around the world and they go, oh, so-and-so looks very effortless in the water, therefore they're not putting in much effort. that it can be a massive misnomer for many, many people, because obviously to swim well, you're still putting in effort. You might be making it look easy, but the number of people that get to come to me and say, Paul, when is this ever going to feel effortless? I've heard that it should feel effortless. When is it ever going to feel effortless? And the short answer is it will never feel effortless. You're still putting in effort. You might just be swimming a little bit faster. So we need to be careful about that. Second thing we're going to discuss is rate, specifically stroke rate, pool versus open water. Got some good little video clips to show you there. And also some anthropometric considerations. So that's me drawing on the old sports science thing there, looking at things like height and build and those sort of things, even hand size as well, as it pertains to stroke rate. We're going to talk about recovery. Number 3, arm recovery, wetsuit versus non-wetsuit, and rough versus smooth swimming. So arm recovery action, what you're doing over the top of the water. And then finally, bringing it all together in terms of rhythm. And 4th point being rhythm there, the defining factor of effective, efficient freestyle swimming, whether you're swimming with a pointy high elbow recovery or a swinging arm recovery action over the top of the water. Rhythm is absolutely everything. Okay, so trait 1, readying. So let's take a quick look through this. So if we dial back to around about 1998, I was hugely lucky to end up being at Bath University with then 5-time world triathlon champion, Mr. Simon Lessing. You can imagine the look and surprise on our face when I'd been there for around about 18 months studying sports and exercise science. They tell us that, you know, somebody's going to come and join the program over here, and they kept it secret from us right until he actually arrived on the day. And the jaws dropped when Simon Lessing, the greatest athlete or greatest triathlete at that point in time, suddenly walked into the onto the pool deck. And you know, we thought, oh my God, what is this sort of thing? How fantastic would that be? Together with the coaches, Chris Jones and Robin Brew and Richard Hobson, they formulated a bit of a training program there at Bath University. So hugely lucky for me to be in that environment and to be actually training alongside Simon Lessing. And what was interesting to me about Simon was that even 8 to 10 years before the Brownlee brothers really came onto the scene, he would swim with a style which seemed quite ungainly. It was quite sort of lopsided, only ever breathe to one side. Would only ever swim the middle 4Ks. So every day we would swim 6 to 7 kilometers in the pool. And Simon would only ever turn up for the middle 4Ks, but he would always do it at a threshold pace. He would always be a stroke or even 3 or 4 strokes ahead of everybody else, always putting on the pressure. And that's very much what his biking and running used to be like. It all used to center around very high tempo, threshold efforts. Very rarely did he ever step up and do anything really, really fast. And I never, ever saw him do anything very, very easy. At least it didn't feel very easy for me when I was doing it alongside him. But Simon used to really inhabit this area, this sort of thresholdy tempo, sweet spot sort of area where he did the majority of his training. And interesting enough, the Brownlee brothers, if we just hear from them again now, they talk about that as well. So one of the secrets to their success. So if we just have a little look at this then, they talk about the most technical thing about swimming, triathlon swimming is the ratio between your threshold speed, what we call CSS or critical swim speed. And they talk about this idea that there are 3 types of swimmer in triathlon. And I'm going to show you this little chart here to sort of help to emphasize that. Those that have a relatively high maximum speed to a lower threshold speed, those with a relatively low maximum speed to a higher threshold, and those that have a relatively low maximum and low threshold speed. Now, if I've already lost you at that point, let's just flash forward to this graph here. So we've got 3 athletes, look, athlete A, athlete B, and athlete C there. Athlete A being the sprinter, athlete B being the so-called diesel engine, and athlete C. Now, what I see, even to this day, is a lot of triathletes getting into swimming, into swim training and saying, I want to get faster with my swim. And they think the solution is to do a load of 100-meter intervals on large rest and recoveries where they really pump up the pace. But what the Brownlee brothers here are saying is completely the opposite to that. And it's completely the opposite to what I used to observe with Simon Lessing, what used to be his forte, as it were. The Brownlee brothers go on to say, triathletes from the first and last groups often perform remarkably similarly in races, even though on paper, those from the first are much better swimmers. You'll see some swimmers who are very fast in the pool, but haven't developed their ability to swim efficiently at pace over long distances. They've trained at a really high pace all the time. They'll go out hard and use up all their strength too fast, which is why there's generally a dead spot in races at around about 300 or 400 meters. I can't begin to count the number of times when I've had a pro athlete come over to Perth, spend some time coaching with us, and go off and do their own little training sessions. And I say, well, tell me what you're doing today. Oh, I still feel I need to get my speed up. So they'll be smashing out these massive intervals with huge rest and recoveries, almost as a little bit of an ego stroke to tell themselves, well, okay, I can swim that speed. But the Brownlee brothers are actually saying that do too much of that work, then potentially what starts to happen is you start to really compromise the CSS development that you do. So when you look at these two charts here, what they're really saying is the blue zone, the threshold speed, needs to come up towards that maximum sprint speed. The problem with doing too much maximum sprint speed work is that gap then starts to open up. And usually what tends to suffer is the threshold speed, the thing that's going to determine how well you swim on any distance of 400 meters and above. So we used to spend a lot of time at Bath University doing a lot of work on threshold speed, and it's really very much the heart and soul of the program that we do here in Perth. That's not to say that we don't do some easier sessions. It's not to say we don't do any speed work at all. But what I'm saying is that when you think I need to improve my speed, I'd encourage you to be thinking what you actually need to increase is your threshold speed relative to your maximum. And the only way you can do that is by identifying what your threshold speed is. It's very easy to do that. You can do it with a 400 and a 200 meter time trial using our little calculation on the SwimSmooth website. Just work out what that pace is. It's actually quite simple. All you need to do is take your time from the 200 meters away from the 400 time and divide it by 2, and that's your pace per 100 for your threshold. And then do some really diligent work trying to dial in that speed. So trait number 2 then. So if that's this sort of trait number 1 is obviously the training side of things, or the readying yourself. Let's now have a little bit of a discussion about stroke rate. The two things obviously go hand in hand in terms of, okay, well, what sort of stroke rate are you swimming at when you're at threshold speed? But let's have a little look at this now. Whilst in my 3rd year at Bath University, I actually worked for British Triathlon as their talent ID officer, where my biggest claim to fame, even to this point here, was finding and helping launch the career of a 15-year-old Harry Wiltshire. Now, Harry actually went on to being the swim bitch himself for the Brownlee brothers up in Leeds, and in 2017 set the fastest swim at the 2017 Hawaii Ironman World Championships, much to the dismay of champion Jan Frodeno. Let's have a little look at Harry's stroke. He's got a very seemingly unorthodox freestyle swim stroke, which looked a lot like Lessing when Lessing used to jump in, albeit Harry looks a little bit more windmill-like. But the key thing is we've used this with coach education in the UK over and over again. And the first thing coaches say is, wouldn't he be so much better if he was just longer and smoother and more effortless in the water with a classic high elbow recovery? The short answer is no. How do I know that? Because I tried it. As a young and impressionable coach at the age of 21, when I first started coaching Harry, I was listening to my peers, listening to what people were saying. You need to do this with him. Take fewer strokes per lap. I tried all of that, and it just made him slower. So something about what Harry was doing, and we'll see this here in this video clip, was working for him. Here we go. Now, in this video clip here, Harry's swimming at a pace of just under 105 per 100 meters. You can see he's only breathing to his left-hand side. One of the primary reasons why Harry, Jonathan, and Alistair Brownlee breathe to their left-hand side is the majority of open water swimming triathlon events are usually on rectangular courses, which usually rotate around in an anti-clockwise format to the left-hand side. Consequently, breathing more frequently to the left can be a real advantage. I'm very sort of pedantic about bilateral breathing and the ability to be able to switch and be versatile and adaptable with your strokes, simply because if you find yourself on a right-hand turn course, you want to know that you can actually obviously switch over to that side. So personally, I do a lot of my racing breathing bilaterally every 3 strokes, but you can obviously only be able to do that. You can only be able to adapt to the conditions, knowing that you're equally comfortable to both sides. So these athletes can do that. The reason you see them racing primarily breathing to the left is because most of the courses that you'll see them racing on is to the left-hand side. Now, if you happen to catch the 2018 Commonwealth Games, what was really interesting about that, again, it was a left-hand turn course, but Alistair and Jonathan were pitched on the pontoon, opposite ends of the pontoon, with Jonathan on Alistair's right-hand side, probably a distance around about 60 meters away from him. It's quite a wide start. So taking that theory that they're only going to breathe to the left because they're on a left-hand turn course, what you'll see in the race footage there from the 2018 Commonwealth Games is Alistair starting off just breathing to the left. But when he recognizes he needs to work out where Jonathan is, he switches over to breathing to his right-hand side. Such adaptability and versatility can only be done in a race situation if you've practiced it in the pool. So just this morning here in Perth, we're doing plenty of work, mixing up breathing to the left, breathing to the right, even doing a cool little exercise where we get the swimmers to actually pop a paddle on their right hand and get them only to breathe to the left-hand side. And equally paddle on the left hand, getting them only to breathe to the right hand side. The theory being that if something is going to go wrong with your stroke, it will happen when you go to take a breath in. The idea of having a paddle, we use the Finnish agility paddles. They're the ones with a little hole for the thumb, if you've seen them. They're designed to fall off your hand if you do something incorrect. So they focus your attention on what, as you breathe, tipping the fingertips down at the front and ensuring you're getting a nice little catch and hold on the water there. So an excellent little paddle for that. Now, little did I know it all the way back then, but when I was working with Harry, finding out that changing his stroke and making his elbow higher and making the stroke longer just didn't work, little did I know at that point, some 10 years later, this experience from working with Harry would go on to form our swim types methodology that really aims to embrace people's individuality. It's gone on to influence thousands of coaches around the world and hopefully literally millions of swimmers as well who watch our YouTube channels, etc. Very much with the mantra, coach the swimmer, not the stroke. Okay, so many people have a clear idea of what a good efficient stroke should look like and almost think that everybody needs to be carbon copied into that. But there's so much variation. You've only got to watch even the Olympic Games in the pool to see that some of the world's best pool swimmers even have variance in their stroke as well. It's about finding out what is the best stroke for you in the conditions in which you're going to be racing. There we go. Coaching the individual, not the stroke. There are some of my squad swimmers. Now, it's the same work with Harry nearly 20 years ago that is influencing now the work that I'm doing with Australia's under-18 open water swimming champion, Byron Kimber. Byron is the short dude there on the right-hand side. He's now 18. This picture was taken when he was 15 years of age when he first came to join me. So he was actually under 5 foot tall, weighing around about 45 kilos. So imagine what the average 15-year-old pool swimmer would look like. They'd probably look a little bit more like Brad on the left-hand side. I also coach Brad as well. Brad is the world record holder for the port to pub 25-kilometre swim over here in Perth. Believe it or not, actually holds that record over Australian Olympian Jared Port. So he's a pretty damn good swimmer himself. But look at the size of the two of them. You can imagine that Brad's wingspan is going to be significantly greater than Byron's. All the coaches who've previously gone with Byron over the years had always said to him, Byron, you need to make your stroke longer. You need to take fewer strokes per lap. You're inefficient. When you're as short as what Byron is and as small, light framed as what he is, he turned up and he was taking around about 55 strokes per 50 meters. Now, I scoff at that a little bit because most people are under the impression that you're not efficient unless you can take 40 strokes or less. You need to discard that myth from your vocabulary right away. Here is Australia's under-18 open water swimming champion.
Not sure I understand.
No, Siri doesn't understand. There we go. She, not sure I understand. Swimming at about 55 strokes per lap and with a stroke rate approaching 90, 95 strokes per minute. It's the only way Byron can actually generate speed in his stroke. If he tries to swim like Brad, that's not going to work. If Brad tries to swim like Byron, that's not going to work either. Here's some of our open water training in Perth just recently during this whole COVID period. You'll see Byron swimming up towards the camera. Let's have a little look.
Right, here comes the Wonder Kid, 6 times 300 metres, averaging a pace of under 105 per 100 metres for all of them on this last lap, thrown down the gauntlet. Can he make 6 minutes? Okay, Byron, there we go. So 3:01 on that last lap, mate. So that's an average, everybody, of just over 1 minute per 100 metres on that last 300 metre loop, mate. Good job.
He's an absolute beast. As you can see with this little chart here, size really does matter when it comes to stroke rate. So if you've ever been told that your stroke is too short and your stroke rate is too quick, okay, it might well be. I'm not saying that it can't possibly be that scenario, but when you look at this little chart here, there's definitely room for variation within that. And very lucky over here in Perth to have Bud McAllister, who was Janet Evans' coach. He's actually moved over here to Perth and coaching here in Perth. And you can see Janet Evans right over on the right-hand side there, only 167 centimetres tall with a stroke rate of 110 strokes per minute. Everybody used to tell Bud the same thing. You need to change your stroke to make her more efficient. He changed it, it slowed it down, so he just ripped up the rule book, as it were, and concentrated on what worked well for her. I would have loved to have seen Janet Evans swimming in the open water. I think she would have gone absolutely amazingly well. Here are two of our swimmers over in Perth, again, just as a good example of why getting the right stroke for the right swimmer is super important. When we look at some metrics, those of you with a keen engineering mind might like to look here at a contrast between, as we're going to look at in a second, the smooths versus swingers. So swinger sounds like it's a fairly derogatory term, and it's got nothing to do with popping keys in the pot or anything like that. But what we're looking at here is just to show, again, people believe that unless you're taking less than 40 strokes per lap, you're not efficient. Try telling that to two-time Olympic gold medalist Alistair Brownlee, or six-time Ironman champion Dave Scott, or Janet Evans, or David Davies, or Shelley Taylor-Smith. They have a stroke which works well for them in the environment in which they're swimming. You'll see that the swimmers over on the left-hand side, ironically enough, these swimmers generally specialize in distances much shorter than their swinger counterparts. Their strokes are longer, but they're usually coupled with a much stronger 6-beat leg kick. When you plot that out on a little chart, we can see here Emma Snowsill, obviously, Olympic gold medalist there, Alistair Brownlee, Olympic gold medalist. They generally tend to inhabit that higher stroke rate range, as opposed to their smooth counterparts with people like Ian Thorpe, etc., just sitting on the lower end of that. What's really interesting is Javier Gomez tends to sit more in the blue zone, in the smooth zone there. On paper, Javier Gomez has a very, very decorated pool swimming background and is a very nice looking freestyle swim stroke. So why is he not always off the front of all the triathlon events around the world? You would think that surely if he's got that much more potential and much more speed in the pool, that he should be able to transfer it into the open water. Well, generally speaking, smooths don't really like to swim in rough, choppy water around lots of other people. Now, that's not to say Javier Gomez can't do that. He can. He's a fantastic athlete, one of my absolute heroes. But it's just really interesting to sort of see that when you've got that much speed, why not that far off the front? And obviously, people like the Brownlee brothers are right up there with him, usually either just sat on their toes or just slightly alongside there. Okay, so let's have a little look at now the arm recovery action over the top of the water. So at the top of our swim type paradigm is what we refer to as the swinger and the smooth, hopefully encapsulated in this nice simple image here, with the swinger on the right hand side with that more swinging arm recovery action, versus the smooth with more of the high elbow recovery. Now, obviously, one of the major differences that you can see on this little image here is the swinger style tends to open out the angle at the elbow and gives a little bit more clearance over the surface of the water, which obviously makes sense if it's fairly rough and choppy. I've got some excellent examples of this in just a moment. So they open out the angle, but what it also does is it helps to actually reduce some restriction in the shoulder as well, especially if you're wearing a wetsuit. So if you've ever worn a wetsuit and thought to yourself, oh, you know, my shoulders get really tired and fatigued. Why is that? I need to go and spend another $800 on a new wetsuit, a new fancy, more flexible wetsuit. Before you go and rush out and buy a new wetsuit, just try, or even switch to a sleeveless, just try opening out that angle and realizing that actually my elbow doesn't need to be like this. It's probably forcing yourself into a very, very awkward position. Open out that angle, go for a little bit more lift, feel like you're reaching up and over the top of the water, swinging a little bit, and you'll find that it feels much, much more effective. And you'll see all the top swimmers, open water swimmers and triathletes swimming like that. Let's look at these two side by side, very contrasting styles suiting different types of events. But notably, the one who looks more effortless, John Van Hazel here on the right-hand side, is not the one who can sustain the effort for a longer duration in the open water, contrary to belief. On the left-hand side, we here have Melissa Benson, Australian open water swimmer, 5 and 10K specialist. Again, she didn't really want us to film her because, in fact, her teammates were on the side of the pool saying, why do you want to film Mel? Why? She's got a horrible stroke. She can't kick. Well, she can. She's got this beautiful rhythmical 2-beat leg kick, just like we saw with Shelley earlier on. You can see John Van Hazel there on the right-hand side. Looks great, but he is a 50-meter specialist, finishing 9th at the Athens Olympic Games. Okay, short video just coming up for you now then, and I'll just pause and take a quick drink of water here. The burning question, swinger or smooth? Which is right? Which is right for you? Are we all aiming to be smooth, or should we all be swingers as triathletes? And the next video will unequivocally clarify, it depends. Here we go. By all means, feel free to dance to the music on this one. Hopefully a bit of a pumping soundtrack for you. What I'd like to do is you watch these swimmers, just think of one word, one adjective that describes the stroke that you're seeing at that point in time. For the numbers geeks out there, you'll see down in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got some live data about the speed that John O'Van Hazel is swimming at. We've got nearly 4 million views on this video on YouTube. People obviously really love it. So much so that we actually created an animation out of him, Mr. Smooth himself, back in 2009, which is free to download from swimsmooth.com. So despite his obvious grace, many smooths tend to be more sprinters or short course specialists. Let's look at one of my favorite all-time swimmers here, Becky Adlington. Again, making things look very easy. Swimming here at 1:12 per 100. Look at how beautiful that looks. Beautiful high horizontal body position in the water. More of that sort of flutter leg kick. Beautiful high elbow catch underneath the water as well. Loved filming Becky back in 2012. Never met this guy. But Robbie, if you can ever put me in touch with the great Torpedo, I'd love it, mate. Here he is. One of my absolute heroes. Interesting enough, Thorpe talks about his own stroke. This is the 2004 Athens Olympic Games. Arguably my favourite event of all time in the pool, between Thorpe here and Peter van den Hoogenman. Thorpe's really versatile in his breathing here, breathing just to his right on the way down the pool and then just to his left on the way back, keeping an eye on the competition. So again, versatility even in the pool is absolutely essential. When Thorpe talks about his stroke, he talks about this idea that he can take 24 strokes per lap if he wants to, but he realizes that at that point, he's just gliding rather than swimming efficiently. There you go. That's the rise of Michael Phelps there as well. What's really interesting about Thorpe's stroke is it looks long and slow, but in actual fact, it's long and fast. The stroke rate there is 76 strokes per minute. If you've ever tried that, then you'll realize just how quick it is. Now, you might get some boos here for this one, especially here in Australia, but Sun Yang, current world record holder for the 1500 freestyle. Very, very long stroke indeed. Hugely tall, this guy. Great alignment going into the water. Again, noticeably just breathing to one side, switching it around a little bit. Really cranking up in that last 50 meters. So again, just think of some adjectives, whatever comes to mind. Is it smooth? Is it high elbow? Is it easy? Is it rhythmical? Is it effortless? Whatever word you want to use. Just have a quick look at Michael Phelps, and then we'll contrast that with some of the world's best open water swimmers and triathletes, and you'll see in an instant that there's a very big contrast between the two. Again, never met Mr. Phelps himself, but huge fan. Okay. Now, let's take a look at these strokes here. For those of you who have a little bit more experience, maybe you've trained in a squad before, see if you can recognize your stroke or somebody that you've trained with in the past. Somebody who doesn't necessarily go that great in the pool, but somehow does amazingly well in the open water. What do they look like? Look at the difference here. Very choppy short stroke from Alistair Brownlee. Breathing primarily to his left-hand side, breathing every 2 strokes. What about this guy, Dave Scott? We've done a lot of work with Dave over the years. 6-time Hawaii Ironman champion. He promised me never, ever to show this video clip to anybody. Sorry, Dave. Breathing to his right-hand side. If you think about the way the Kona course goes, it is round to the right-hand side. Janet Evans, 3-time Olympic gold medalist, longest standing record in swimming history of this 800 freestyle. Totally unorthodox stroke. Remember, 167 centimeters tall. It looks like she's just thrashing her way down the pool. So obviously our discussion today is about open water swimming, but even in the pool here, there are swimmers who need to adopt a different style of stroke to make them more effective. And she is really the absolute epitome of that. I just got a couple more for you, and then we'll crack on with the last point, trait number 4, which is rhythm, the rhythm of the stroke, which again, of course, is tied into rate as well, these 4 R's. David Davies. Now, interesting enough, David Davies took an Olympic bronze medal in Athens in the pool, just behind Grant Hackett in 2004. In 2008, in only his 3rd ever open water swimming event, which is what you're watching right now. So he's only raced, he's raced 2 open water swimming events to get to this point. He ends up picking up an Olympic silver medal in Beijing in 2008. Notice his stroke is quite sort of choppy, goes in for the feed. Now, if you've got an Olympic bronze medal in 2004, Olympic silver medal in 2008, what do you think you're chasing in 2012? That's right, Olympic gold medal in your home country in the UK there at the London Olympic Games. Now, not only did David Davies not pick up a gold medal, he didn't even qualify for the event. Funny enough, what happened was a coach from the US came over and spent some time with the British swimming team, recognised that Davies' stroke looked too short and too scrappy, and decided to lengthen him out and reduce his stroke rate. I'll leave the conclusion to yourself in terms of whether you think that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do because of the aesthetics of the stroke. And here we go, Shelley Taylor-Smith, 7-time world marathon swimming champion. So nobody managed to change Shelley, which is great. Look at her powering along here around New York City. Absolutely amazing. And I very much do like the way these guys and girls move. Alrighty. So on to our final point then, and then we'll have a couple of Q&As if we've got a little bit of time. I'm cognizant here that we're running a little bit over. By all means, I think Robbie's actually recording all this. So if you do have to dive off, don't be afraid to do so. Trait number 4, rhythm. Now, we got this email a little while ago. Hi, Swim Smooth team. My name is Laura Quilter. I'm a former New Zealand swimmer and surf lifesaver. I competed for over a decade in the pool, and I'm amazed by how different a lot of your advice and technical information is to what I has experienced as an athlete. This is some of the controversy stuff that we're talking about earlier on. It's genuinely incredible to read about avoiding the glide and long swimming when that was almost all I heard as a growing athlete. So if you're listening to this now and you're thinking, well, yeah, but that was back then, I now understand that. Well, again, great, because your focus and your perception on things has been changed for the better because of everything that we've just seen so far. And the message, hopefully, is finally getting through. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for challenging my thinking, my philosophies, and pushing me to consider alternative ways of coaching and approaching my own training. While my competitive career is now over, I do coach in an age group squad 3 mornings a week and an age adult fitness group twice a week. A number of my adult groups are fans of Swim Smooth, which is how I found out about it. Now, let's have a little quick look here when we're talking about the context of rhythm, which is obviously a measure of how somebody flows through the water, specifically, again, tied in with stroke rate, how the world of swim coaching is changing by thinking differently. Now, I've got here we're going to look at these 3 articles just very briefly here from the same author in the same publication, US Triathlete magazine, over a span of 6 years. None of them refer to each other, but on the tips published in 2010, 7 tips to improve your efficiency in the open water. Number 4, remember to glide. Now, the reason I bring this up, and I have flagged this on the interwebs over the years, is if you're on the internet chasing how to swim better, chances are you might still come across this article. Now, even though the author actually disagrees with the statements from 2010 now, as you're going to see in a second, you still might read this and you might think, oh yeah, gliding, I heard about that. That's what I need to do. So what we're saying here is that you need to remember to glide. The stroke needs to be continuous, or it should be. Don't be a windmill. So despite everything that we've just seen with those top open water swimmers and triathletes, okay, this advice seems to be contrary to that, but that was back in 2010. In 2015, in the same magazine by the same author, Sarah McClarty is now quoting here Swim Smooth's Paul Newsome himself, obviously, compared the stroke rates or strokes per minute between the medalists in the men's Olympic 1500 and the 1500 swim at the start of the men's Olympic triathlon. Here's what he found. So this is comparing Sun Yang basically to Alistair Brownlee, 65 strokes per minute versus 89. She says, this trend of high stroke rate persists with the top female triathletes as well as the best open water swimmers in the world. A higher rate or rhythm allows triathletes to adapt to any open water conditions, especially choppy waves. Now, what's really quite interesting about this is then in 2016, now we're told efficient swimmers don't glide, they reach. And the whole topic here is, we'll read just down the bottom here. When a swimmer pauses to glide, he's really doing one of two things, either immediately slowing down because he's no longer providing propulsion with the stroke, or providing additional propulsion with a strong kick. Because a triathlete does not want to do either of those two things, slow down or kick harder, gliding is not the best concept to focus on in the water. Hallelujah. We're finally getting that message across here. Now, just got this super short clip here. This is Rebecca Adlington speaking with Mark Foster, former world record holder in the 50-meter butterfly, somebody I used to train with at Bath University. So he's a pure out-and-out sprinter. Let's listen to what he says about efficiency in the water. Mark Foster on Distance Freestyle Swimming, talking about the difference here between Romanchuk and the Olympic champion, 2016 1500-meter champion, Gregorio Paltrinieri. So let's have a quick look at this.
I mean, listen, that's one of these things when you're breaking down every length. Romanchuk was taking 13 strokes less than Paltrinieri, which over 1500 metres is 390 strokes. Good maths. What? Good maths. Good maths. Well, yeah, I was good at maths. You randomly selected. I've got a lot of things to think about in 15 minutes. But I'm observing to observe the different techniques. And obviously, Romanchuk's a lot more efficient, but then it takes more energy to be that more efficient, if you like.
It takes more energy to be more efficient. Interesting. Okay, so really, both Sarah and Mark could have just taken advice, hopefully, from 2000 Olympic triathlon gold medalist Simon Whitfield. And hopefully there've been a whole lot of less confused distance swimmers and triathletes out there. Simon Whitfield saying here on Twitter, listening to an age group triathlon coach yell, kick harder and slow down your stroke, unless you're playing a game of do the opposite, this is bad advice. And now there is some science behind all of this, not just us being, or me being facetious here and pointing out some of the confusion that it exists with all the various information out there. If we have a little look at this chart here, down the bottom, we've got stroke rate versus heart rate and oxygen consumption at the side. Back in 2010, a study was actually done on a range of different swimmers in an endless pool where they looked to actually manipulate their stroke rate, and essentially they encouraged them to stroke faster or stroke with a longer stroke and essentially having more glide in there. On the left-hand side of the chart, we see that as people reduce their stroke rate, heart rate and oxygen consumption both actually increase, simply because what's happening there is the swimmer is starting to kick harder just to keep themselves actually moving forwards and not reducing some of that momentum. So that's really quite important to make sure, especially for triathlon, that we're not overly utilizing the leg kick there. So are you saying that we don't like Mr. Smooth style anymore? Hardly young Padawan. I'm a bit of a Star Wars geek here. We wouldn't be called Swim Smooth otherwise. It's about getting the right stroke for the right conditions. And the best smooths are the ones who can adapt accordingly to their open water environment. So just proving that swingers can actually be smooth, here's 1988 Olympian Annika in London from our Swedish swim smooth coach. Let's take a little look at her stroke and what we can see from this. So she's got that high arm recovery over the top of the water, a very rhythmical stroke. In fact, the epitome of rhythm, if you ask me. Nicely balanced. She typically race over distances now around about the sort of the Ironman distance, up to about 5Ks. Beautiful shot from the side here. So there's absolutely no question here. I would classify her as a swinger, somebody who swims very well in the open water. Is she still smooth though? Has she still got some good rhythm about her? Absolutely. Okay, so just moving on then, let's take a little look at this super short clip. It's just some of the swimmers in the river session. So as I mentioned, from the 1st of May, we're back in the open water. We ran a session every day down at the river. We had a 6:45 group, a 8:15 a.m. group, and a 9:30 a.m. group, 6 days a week down there. We managed to run a total of, we were averaging around about 220 swimmers per week. So given the fact that we didn't have any lane fees to consider between the start of May and the middle of June when we actually got back into the pool there, the profit of the squad, if you like, was equal to what it would have been in the pool. But we sort of made sure that we actually split everybody up into these smaller groups, 9 swimmers to 1 coach. So we were allowed a group of 10 ratio, and we split up over around about 150 meters between us. So let's take a quick look here.
2, 1, yep. Absolutely stellar morning down here. Look at that. Beautiful. So we've got 3 groups of 9 swimmers separated by around about 150 meters between the groups, doing our things for social distancing. Ooh, just watch that corner then. There we go. Let's watch them coming around. Oh, looks like Byron got clobbered. There we go. Harriet leading the way. Byron's going to make a comeback. Oh, he's going butterfly. Look at that. Fantastic. What a morning.
So when we started out with these sessions, you can probably imagine that if you're in that situation yourself now, it was quite hard to get started. We weren't quite sure what people would be up for, having had such a long time out of the water. We decided that we'd keep the sessions fairly short, around about 45 minutes in length. But as they started to take form over the first couple of weeks, so too did we then start to add a little bit of structure. So if we just have a quick look at this here. On Mondays, what we do was we organised the area within the river there, which is around about, like I say, end to end, about 500 metres. We had 3 groups separated by about 150 metres. They'd set off. We'd have the first group, typically the fastest group, run by myself usually. We'd set off and we'd always have a one directional longer warm-up course, which is around about 900 meters. We'd then follow this off on a Monday morning with some short, sharp intervals, adopting a fartlek session. Now, the way we do that is with, I'll just grab a little gadget here, is with a tempo trainer. Now, a tempo trainer can be used in 3 different modes, and I'll talk to you about how we utilize those to structure the sessions in just a second. If you have a tempo trainer and you want to do Monday morning session, turn it on, turn it into mode 2. And for example, we were doing 15-second intervals. So what you might try to do for a fartlek is you might turn it on and the beep will go at you every 15 seconds or every 30 seconds or every 60 seconds, whatever you want to do. But what you can do is get quite structured with this fartlek session so that, okay, turn it on, I'm going to swim fast for 4 beeps. So 4 beeps obviously being a minute. And I'm going to swim slow for 4 beeps. And I'm going to swim fast for 3 beeps, slow for 3 beeps, fast for 2 beeps, slow for 2 beeps, fast for 1 beep, slow for 1 beep. That's quite an easy way of actually just doing a little bit of a fartlek session there in the open water. Equally, you could extend those distances out as well. So each of the swimmers in the open water ended up having a tempo trainer. What you can do with the tempo trainer, especially if you want to do a longer swim and get quite creative, is if you've got a Garmin, especially an old one, I tend to use a Garmin 310 XT that I just stick underneath my cap. I'll set that to beep at me after 500 meters. And if I want to go for a long continuous swim, let's say I want to average around about 14 minutes or 15 minutes a K, let's say for argument's sake, I'll actually turn this on in mode 2 to 7.5 minutes, turn the Garmin on to beep at me every 500, press go at the same time, and I might go for a swim for an hour and just make sure that I'm actually getting to that same measured marker point, 500 meters, at the same time the 7.5 minute beeper is going on the clock there. So it's quite a cool way of actually doing that. On Tuesdays, we did what we call a randonnée set, which featured an alternating block of mid-length, transition to a new location type of thing, swims of 250 to 500 meters with some shorter intervals, typically over triangular courses. So if you are swimming in the open water, you want to get structured, highly recommend actually identifying a triangular course, which we were doing with the marker buoys for the boats out there. The reason being is if you want to shuttle backwards and forwards, obviously it starts to pose a bit of a safety risk if you're shuttling backwards and forwards and you have swimmers of different speed, which of course you will do. So by creating a triangular course and actually going around that triangular course over these shorter intervals, it helps with turning practice and also just helps to keep everybody safe as well. The idea of the randonnée is we had this beautiful 500-meter bay and people ended up just getting a little bit bored of swimming always around the same buoys. So on that particular session on a Tuesday, we'd do a session or a group of intervals in one area and then move as a group onto the next part, just an easy swim, do some intervals on a slightly different format, slightly different distance, and then move on, etc. Wednesdays became really quite popular, and this is one of my favorite features actually, is using what we call a ticking time bomb. So again, you can do this by yourself. If you're out in the open water, identify a course that you want to swim around and maybe use just a standard stopwatch and go, okay, right, I'll swim around there. Okay, it's taken me 2.5 minutes. I swam it around about 75% effort. It's taken me 2.5 minutes. Again, you can use the tempo trainer in mode 2, dial in 2.5 minutes, and then start to do some intervals, just making sure that you actually get back to that starting point at the same time or slightly before the beeper goes. And of course, you can then do a descending set from that. So it might be 2:30 on your first one, 2:25, 2:20, and so on and so forth. It becomes like a ticking time bomb because as opposed to using these like we do in the pool, where we've typically got them beeping every 25, so you always know whether or not you're on track or not. This thing, obviously in the open water, we don't really know the distances that we're swimming, but you've got this sort of bit of encouragement, bit of excitement about swimming around and actually trying to make sure you get to a certain point as the beeper goes there. On Thursday, we had this one wasn't so popular, and it's an interesting one really, especially with respect to thinking everyone's been out of the water for a long period of time. Surely they're just going to need an easier session. Maybe they want to focus on things like sighting and drafting and turning, all that stuff that I'm going to include in that PDF for you guys to actually look through. So if you want to know a bit more about how to draft better, how to turn better, etc., it's all included there in that PDF. And the structure on the Thursday morning was very much to go through a lot of that. Problem being though, water temperatures over here in Perth were starting to dip down to about 15, 16. So even though everyone was compulsory wearing a wetsuit, it started to get quite hard to do some of that technical work as much as I'd like to have done it. So we tried to actually sort of incorporate it into some of the intervals. And, you know, again, concentration spans can tend to drop off a little bit when you're freezing cold in the open water there. And then Fridays was very much a recollection of what we'd normally do in the pool. It'd be one of these CSS development sessions that I mentioned earlier on, something like 2 or 3 times 200 meters, followed by 2 to 4 times 50-meter pickups, where we just lift up the pace a little bit. To do that with a partner, you could actually just, on the pickups, just try to actually race against each other. But on the 200-meter intervals, just set a time and obviously then swim around. Now, if you are using a GPS watch, then of course you can do your intervals via that. You might have your Garmin beeping you every 200 meters and just swim to that point there. I think one of the things I like to use with the tempo trainer is that whilst you're doing some of this stuff, you can also have it working on stroke rate. So I've been talking today a lot about stroke rate and the variance between some of the best pool swimmers in the world, best open water swimmers in the world. I typically look at the swimmers that I had, the 9 swimmers that I had, work out where that natural average stroke rate was. So let's say it was 60 strokes per minute. And I'd say to them, okay, let's have a little go, maybe try 64 or 65 strokes per minute. So they'd pop the beeper underneath the cap and it just beep at them every time their hand should be going into the water. So beep, 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 like so on. And they can experiment with that. One of the interesting things is if you're listening to this today and thinking, you know what, I might have been one of those overgliders. I might be sort of swimming with my stroke too slow. Firstly, don't think it, measure it, see what it is, and then utilize some of the materials that we have on swimsmooth.com to work out whether it's too fast or too slow. Ordinarily, the reason somebody's stroke rate might be too slow is because there's an issue with a dead spot at the front of the stroke. So we typically see that type of swimmer entering in, reaching forward and pausing and gliding at the front end of the stroke and almost swimming with a sort of catch-up style of stroke like so. So if that swimmer was to simply try to increase their stroke rate because they've seen it on some of these videos, that's not necessarily going to work. With the stroke correction work that I do and with all the video analysis stuff over here in Perth, what I try to focus on doing is try to identify where exactly within the stroke that dead spot is. Is it because the hand is doing this and pausing up at the front of the stroke? Get that swimmer to enter and spear a little bit deeper, get them into their catch a little bit sooner, and their stroke rate will then naturally start to come up and the whole stroke will flow that much better. That's one of the things to actually watch out for. So just because you might have a slow stroke rate, maybe a lot slower than some of those numbers that I've been talking about there today, doesn't necessarily mean that the solution to this is just turn your arms over quicker. If you've still got that dead spot, that's going to feel very, very awkward, almost akin to driving down the freeway with your handbrake on. We need to release that handbrake and the stroke rate will naturally then start to come up. And just one final point on that, on the stroke rate side of things, we would term all those numbers that I've been talking about today would be counting stroke rate like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're drawing data off your Garmin, be careful because the Garmin will probably be measuring the stroke rate as 1, 2, 3, 4, which should ultimately give you a score of exactly half of what I've been talking about there today. So just watch out for that. You might think, oh my God, I've only got a stroke rate of 25. Chances are you haven't really got a stroke rate of 25. It's probably 50, but even then that would still be slightly on the low side there. So there we go. It's a little bit about how we structure some of that.